Joe Biden's withdrawal from the U.S. presidential race injects greater uncertainty into the world at a time when Western leaders are grappling with wars in Ukraine and Gaza, a more assertive China in Asia, and the rise of the far right in Europe. This during a 5-decade career in politics, Biden developed extensive personal relationships with multiple foreign leaders that none of the potential replacements on the Democratic ticket can match. After his announcement, messages of support and gratitude for his years of service poured in from near and far. The scope of foreign policy challenges facing the next U.S. president makes clear how consequential what happens in Washington is for the rest of the planet. Here's a look at some of them. First up, Israel. With Vice President Kamala Harris being eyed as a potential replacement for Biden, Israelis on Sunday scrambled to understand what her candidacy would mean for their country as it confronts increasing global isolation over its military campaign against Hamas. Israel's left-wing Haaretz daily newspaper ran a story scrutinizing Harris's record of support for Israel, pointing to her reputation as Biden's bad cop, who has vocally admonished Israel for its offensive in Gaza. In recent months, she has gone further than Biden in calling for a ceasefire, denouncing Israel's invasion of Rafah and expressing horror over the civilian death toll in Gaza. Biden's staunch defense of Israel since Hamas' October 7 attack has its roots in his half-century of support for the country as a senator, vice president, then president. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant thanked Biden for his unwavering support of Israel over the years. On social media platform X, and added, "Your steadfast backing, especially during the war, has been invaluable." Israeli President Isaac Herzog praised Biden as a symbol of the unbreakable bond between our two peoples, and a true ally of the Jewish people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a statement at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport before leaving for Washington to deliver a landmark speech to the U.S. Congress.
I plan to see President Biden, whom I've known for over 40 years. This will be an opportunity to thank him for the things he did for Israel in the war and during his long and distinguished career in public service as senator, as vice president, and as president. It will also be an opportunity to discuss with him how to advance in the critical months ahead the goals that are important for both our countries. Achieving the release of all our hostages, defeating Hamas, confronting the terror axis of Iran and its proxies, and ensuring that all Israel citizens return safely to their homes in the north and in the south.
Next up is another war that has kept the Western world on its toes. Ukraine war. Any Democratic candidate would likely continue Biden's legacy of staunch military support for Ukraine. But frustration with the Biden administration has grown in Ukraine and Europe over the slow pace of U.S. aid and restrictions on the use of Western weapons. It is now largely believed that most Europeans realize that Ukraine is increasingly going to be their burden, and this is why we have seen EU trying to get ready for all the possible outcomes. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on X that he respected the tough but strong decision by Biden to drop out of the campaign, and he thanked Biden for his help in preventing Putin from occupying our country. Trump has promised to end Russia's war on Ukraine in one day if he is elected, a prospect that has raised fears in Ukraine that Russia might be allowed to keep the territory it occupies. Trump's vice presidential pick, Ohio Sen. J.D. Vance, is among Congress's most vocal opponents of U.S. aid for Ukraine and has further raised the stakes for Kyiv. Russia, meanwhile, dismissed the importance of the race, insisting that no matter what happened, Moscow would press on in Ukraine. Third foreign policy concern is China. In recent months, both Biden and Trump have tried to show voters who can best stand up to Beijing's growing military strength and belligerence and protect U.S. businesses and workers from low-priced Chinese imports. Biden has hiked tariffs on electric vehicles from China, and Trump has promised to implement tariffs of 60% on all Chinese products. Trump's America First doctrine exacerbated tensions with Beijing, but disputes with the geopolitical rival and economic colossus over war, trade, technology and security continued into Biden's term. China's official reaction to the U.S. presidential race has been careful. They termed it U.S. internal politics and said they have no comments. The official Xinhua news agency treated the story of Biden's decision as relatively minor. Next up is Iran. With Iran's proxies across the Middle East increasingly entangled in the Israel-Hamas war, the U.S. confronts a region in disarray. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis struck Tel Aviv for the first time last week, prompting retaliatory Israeli strikes inside war-torn Yemen. Simmering tensions and cross-border attacks between Lebanon's Iran-backed Hezbollah militant group and the Israeli military have raised fears of an all-out regional conflagration. Hamas, which also receives support from Iran, continues to fight Israel even 9 months into a war that has killed 38,000 Palestinians and displaced over 80% of Gaza's population. The US and its allies have accused Iran of expanding its nuclear program and enriching uranium to an unprecedented 60% level, near weapons-grade levels. After then-President Trump in 2018 withdrew from Tehran's landmark nuclear deal with world powers, Biden said he wanted to reverse his predecessor's hawkish anti-Iran stance. But the Biden administration has maintained severe economic sanctions against Iran and overseen failed attempts to renegotiate the agreement. The sudden death of Ibrahim Raisi, the supreme leader's hardline protege, in a helicopter crash vaulted a new reformist to the presidency in Iran, generating new opportunities and risks. Masoud Pezeshkian has said he wants to help Iran open up to the world but has maintained a defiant tone against the US. Last but not the least is NATO and EU. Many Europeans were happy to see Trump go after his years of disparaging the European Union and undermining NATO. Trump's seemingly dismissive attitude toward European allies in last month's presidential debate did nothing to assuage those concerns. Biden, on the other hand, has supported close American relations with bloc leaders. That closeness was on stark display after Biden's decision to bow out of the race. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called his choice, probably the most difficult one in your life. The newly installed British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said he respected Biden's decision based on what he believes is in the best interests of the American people. There was also an outpouring of affection from Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris, who called Biden a proud American with an Irish soul. The question of whether NATO can maintain its momentum in supporting Ukraine and checking the ambitions of other authoritarian states hangs in the balance of this presidential election, analysts say. Do tell us what you think about this video in comments section and subscribe for more US election news.